Hi guys, thank you for coming to watch the last part of our 3-part series on purity culture here on Youth Group. We have Kendra again, but we have a new guest. We have Ezrica Bennett. Can you please introduce yourself? Why are you qualified, and what is purity culture to you?
Yes, hi, my name is Ezrica Bennett. I'm a writer. I work a lot in the church with young adults. I've been, I guess, in ministry since I was probably 17, so, only 2 years. Just kidding.
I believe you. I genuinely believe you.
No. And the question of why am I qualified? Well, I don't know that there are specific qualifications. I don't have a doctorate of sort. I only have experience. But I think that's, in a sense, what ties us to this conversation, is that we all have some level of experience with purity culture that has been, in many ways, destructive, in many ways, limiting. And so I think it's just an opportunity to share some of the ideas and healing that I've gone through as a result of deconstructing this, I think, very problematic culture. And so the question of what is purity culture to me, I think if you asked me that question when I was in undergrad, it'd be very different than my answer now. My answer now is purity culture to me is irrelevant. Like, it's not something I lose sleep over. I've spent a significant amount of time in various forms of therapy, learning to honor my, my interior world, learning to honor my humanity. And purity culture, in many ways, takes something so vast, so deep, so meaningful, and tries to put it in a box. And typically when you force things into boxes, like there's bleed over, there's, it's just problematic. So to me, purity culture now, personally, is not something I worry about, but I still know that it has a crippling effect on many people. And so that's why I'm interested in it still, because people are hurting. And I find that, that always breaks my heart. So that would be my answer to what is purity culture as a more self-actualized woman.
And this episode is all about reconstruction, and I think that deconstruction is absolutely imperative before we can reconstruct it.
Absolutely.
Before we can figure out what comes next.
Yeah, I think for me, like, when I think about my own journey of deconstruction, I think I've come to this place where I've realized, like, I want to base my life on ethics in the real world. Like looking at the questions of, is this harming me or is this harming others, like in a legitimate way? And I think, a lot of what is left over from purity culture in some ways is very ritualistic, religious in that sense. And I think, looking back at like something like Leviticus, back then we would see they have all these different rules, like, when you carry a dead body, go ahead and like change your clothes and wash your hands and stay outside the gate for, 24 hours. And that just looks like a bunch of ritual. But I think as we move into the 21st century, we understand like, oh, there's germs and there's bacteria, and that's the transmission of disease. And I think so many of us are still living in that ritualistic sense of purity instead of just an actual real lived and understandable way of purity, So for example, I think about, like, for example, sexually transmitted diseases. I think the invention of like penicillin and different types of antibiotics, I mean, that's a recent invention, like 1940s, I think, is when we had the first kind of anti-medication for like syphilis. So I think it's one of those things where it's like, what do we do now that we live in a world where we're not worried about the contamination and containment of disease? Like COVID was one of the recent examples of like, we have to quarantine in order to stay safe. And I think purity culture, in some ways, abstinence was a way to stay safe, or one partner was a way to stay safe.
If you can't do it safely, don't do it at all.
Right, exactly. But now that we have all these ways in the health and medical field to be and practice self-expression in a safe and healthy way, like, how do we move forward now in the 21st century?
Yeah, I mean, it's the whole sex question is so weird to me because, we kind of left off the last episode with the idea that essentially if you save yourself until marriage, then it's going to be so good afterwards.
Like, you'll be rewarded.
Yeah,
God will reward you for your purity.
I think it's a pretty common universal female experience to have a note in your phone of like all of your past relationships and experiences. I know my note is really funny to look back at because after every relationship, I I make very detailed notes, like weirdly detailed.
Awesome.
And
Can I look at those notes
I
later?
know. I
of
was
course, yes.
I was like, I definitely don't want any trail of my past relationship. But like, I'm like, burn this.
Like, I'd rather not remember.
And like it goes so beyond anything in mine. It's talking about like the person themselves. It's talking about like how the sex was in the relationship, and
Yeah.
it's really funny to watch the notes progress because it just keeps getting better and better. Like
Yeah.
each person in the notes section is like, the sex was like so good, best I've had, and then the next person even better. Like,
Yeah.
and this idea that you're going to save yourself until marriage, and then it's going to be some magical experience. You're going to have the best time of your life. My
With some
first time was
unexperienced-
awkward as
yeah.
hell.
Yeah.
And so it's like, how can that be so good and so amazing when you have no idea what you're doing and there's shame around it? There's so
Right.
much shame around it.
Right. Exactly.
I actually want to present like a contrary idea simply because I am actually someone that my first time will likely be with my partner, will be with my husband. I think there's a part of it that probably started when I was younger with this idea of purity culture, with this idea of like saving yourself for marriage. But then it just became a decision that I personally wanted to follow through on. And it's not something I think rooted in shame. It's just my personal choice. In as much as other people get to choose, if they want to sleep with their current partner, for me right now, where I am, my personal choice is that I do want to wait. So the question of like, how can it be good? I mean, I think there are different definitions to good, right? Like, as in like, will it feel good? Maybe not. But I think there's also this element of I made a decision and I stuck with that. There's a value in that too. There's a virtue in that. And I think the problem with purity culture is that it took something so personal, which is your sexuality, so intimate, which is relationship, and decided that there was a cookie cutter way to navigate it. It robbed each of us to like experience the beauty of autonomy and of choice. For me to say like, hey, I really love this person and I want to be with them in that way, and that be tagged to shame or worth, even salvation, is something that's really insidious about purity culture. It takes the depth and beauty of humanity and it relegates it. Like, my worth as a human is that I'm in a relationship. My worth as a woman is that I'm in a relationship. And so it takes this really grand thing again and puts it in such a small scope, and it diminishes my ability to just experience, to make choices, to fail, to succeed. So speaking specifically to the idea of that, like that, how can it be good? I don't know. I actually don't know. But I suspect for me, something that I'll find value in is that I stuck to something I believed in as much as all of us are.
I think I love that you're on this podcast because I feel like we're all talking about like sex and stuff, but you're coming from like this place of like consent that is so beautiful. And I think that's like something, oddly enough, was robbed of me personally with purity culture, is that it was forced consent to an ideology that I had really no education behind. It was just expected of me, versus you like deconstructed and came to a conclusion yourself saying, I'm going to do this not necessarily for my religion, but for me. Like, it's something I want to do for myself. And I think that's so beautiful, just like having that autonomy over yourself, whether that is to choose sex or to save yourself for marriage, just being able to make that very logical and secure decision. I think is something awesome to do, especially as a woman.
And I think also because a lot of that decision came from me knowing me, right? Like, I'm such a feeler, right? Like, and also a person that like, when I love, I love. And even with people that like unrequited love, they didn't even like me back. I like, the world ended. And so like, I think there became this point in my life where I'm like, I know that, not even just like, I know that I want to save this for marriage, because I'm not saving it for the guy. I'm saving me.
Exactly.
Because I think I'm worth it. Because I think I deserve the right to be like, this is what works best for Ezrica. This is the way that I protect who I am. I think I'm so fiercely worth being loved and loved well. And the way I navigate that in this life is in my specific journey is that I'm choosing not to engage in certain types of relationship with people, not because this is what the church tells me. Quite frankly, bump the church. Like, I don't really care about these people's opinions. And maybe there's a part of it is that as a Black woman, I've had to step out of so many cultures.
Yeah.
Exactly. Like I've had to in undergrad, there was an article, and I'll never forget this. I'm writing about it right now, but it was an article, and it listed the most attractive people from cultures, and Black women were the least attractive. There were statistics.
Wrong.
That's such a subjective, like,
Yeah.
how are you going to put statistics on a severely
Exactly.
subjective thing?
opinion. Yeah.
Nonetheless, they did, and I've spent years having to unlearn that. So
Yeah.
I don't really care what people say about purity culture per se. Even in undergrad, I felt like I feel like you don't get to tell me how to be me because
live
you
your
have
life.
no clue how to be me.
And even
Yeah,
though your
exactly.
decision technically follows the rules of
Yes,
purity culture, it's still
exactly.
so anti-purity culture
Because it's
because
so
it's
autonomous.
you making the
Exactly.
decision.
And
Like-
something we talked about, like, even before the show was, like, I think a better, even more relevant way to talk about purity culture would be, like, just about self-autonomy. Like,
Yes.
do I have self-clarity?
Mhm.
And I think, like, purity is about self-clarity. Like, am I consenting to this? Do I want to do this? What are my tastes? What is my sexual preference? What is my identity?
And what is
Like-
the vocabulary behind
Yeah.
it? I think that is so
Exactly.
important, specifically.
Yeah.
We're talking about, like, how do we move forward? And I think it's so difficult for a panel of people to talk about this, considering
Yeah.
none of us have kids. Like,
I have a dog and a cat, so
That counts.
I have cats.
My cats
Yes.
definitely count.
I'm
I-
definitely a mom, okay?
Go girl. That's right.
I as well. But, like, if you were to have a child, like, how would you bring up this, like, conversation to them, like,
Yeah.
in their adolescence?
And I would
That's
want
a-
them to have bodily autonomy. And, like, I think consent is so important, like an enthusiastic consent, to be able to say, this is what I want and this is who I am. Whether it's peer pressure to do something or to not to do something, like, that's not being in control of yourself.
Yeah.
And so having an intellectual understanding of why I'm doing what I'm doing, I think for me falls under the, am I harming myself or am I harming other people? Like, how do I live within that bracket of ethics of, like, what is the harm to self or others? And if I'm not doing either, then for me, I'm like, green light.
Yeah.
I know I personally learned about just even anatomy from my sister's A&P textbook because I would never have gotten the talk from my parents. Even if I had waited until I moved out, I would have never gotten it.
Yeah.
Especially being in an environment where sex and just relationships and emotional intimacy were so highly controlled. I had to learn from seeing the little A&P sketches of, like, this is what a man has, this is what a woman has. And even that is such a confined idea.
Yeah. And even, like, to speak to that, I think even when it comes to, like, especially I would say, like, lesbian relationships, it's not something that is portrayed often in the culture. And so often you see these heteronormative relationships and you're searching for what to make of these feelings, what to make of, what does a relationship with another woman actually look like trying to create a new mold for yourself where there is no mold. And so having more open conversations and having more kind of representations of what relationship can look like.
And when it is represented, it's usually fetishized.
Yes.
Yeah, and I think so. I guess, like, from my perspective, because I think we can all only share from our stories. I think to answer the question of if I had a daughter or a son, how would I navigate that? Well, I think a lot of that the conversations I would have with my children are the conversations I would have had with myself, right? Like, I think I don't walk around feeling defined by my sexuality, feeling defined by my skin color, feeling defined by my gender, because I'm not the only Black person out there. That's not unique to me. I'm not the only straight woman out there. That's not unique to me. I'm not the only Adventist. I'm not the only writer. There are so many things that are not unique to me, but I am the only Ezrica.
Yeah.
And I feel like how I would navigate purity culture in the future if I have kids, and how I've spent a lot of time unlearning, is that for me, purity culture puts sexuality at the forefront. It took, like, if we are a pie, like we're a pie chart. It took 1% or like one part of me and made that the most important part. I would teach my kids in the way I've had to teach myself that the entirety of my being is worthy of love, that no choice diminishes that. Like
we're so much more than if you're a virgin or not.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Like I even remember thinking, or a part of purity culture was being told that my virginity would be a gift to my husband. And I feel like that's wild.
And it
That's
itemizes
such a
it
wild
itemizes such a broad,
what
like
even?
Yeah.
unique concept. I could only imagine like the breakdown, like specifically a woman would have. I'm supposing you change your last name. You don't have that purity ring anymore. You don't have that one thing that you put all of your self-worth onto.
Yeah.
You're probably just completely ridden of like any self-worth.
Yeah.
I have this weird little what is it called? That's besides the point. I have this weird thing that I like to do where I watch like fundamentalist couple YouTubers.
Oh, yes.
Like, I don't know why I go down
Sounds like
this.
masochism to me.
No, it is.
No,
But
no,
like,
it's
also,
so
like,
much fun. So Spectrum, they did like these tote bags recently, and I was the one that stuffed every single one of those tote bags. And
You did
what I would
amazing,
do
Sofia.
what I would do for those hours was watch like 2 hours of fundamentalist couples like talk about their
what it's like to be a
virginity.
couple,
Yeah, their virginity experience and how great it was that they saved themselves for marriage. But like whenever the women talk, it sounded
She's so repressed.
she's so beyond
Yeah.
repressed and she's so lost. Like it's so clear.
And
And
what
I'm
even is virginity if you're not speaking in a heterosexual straight couple situation?
Yeah.
Like,
If you're
what
lesbian,
even
you'll
does
be
it
a
mean?
perpetual
Yeah,
virgin.
you're gonna
I
be a
guess.
virgin for the rest of your life.
I also think the danger with this idea of my virginity is my gift to my husband. One, no, I think there's several things. One, I realize we are in a culture, or like we grew up in a world where we were taught about finding a partner before we were taught about finding ourselves.
Yeah.
Cueing like Disney movies. I know there were conversations about that. Two, what happens if my virginity was robbed from me? What happens to the people who they had things stolen from them in disgusting and forceful ways via sexual abuse?
Yeah.
That means if you're making a general statement that your virginity is a gift to your husband, that's not something they technically could offer to them.
Yeah.
Does that mean that they're less than? What happens in that context? I feel like many cultures, and especially purity culture, rest on a lot of privilege.
Yeah.
Because another thing is purity culture in the Black community is very different, right? Like a part of purity culture is like the dress reform, wearing a skirt down to your ankle or whatever the case is. I'm naturally curvy. A lot of like people from the Black community, the Hispanic community are naturally curvy,
Yeah.
and we were taught to hate that part of us because somehow it's like I'm a temptation to someone else. It's incumbent on me to dress in a way that doesn't cause them to fall, not incumbent on them to control
Not
their
sexualizing you,
desires.
yeah.
Exactly.
it's so much
Yeah.
responsibility to put
Yeah.
on someone like for the holiness of other people.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And
And I
that's
think,
sorry,
yeah.
go ahead.
No,
Go.
I think to speak what you're saying, for people who have had that kind of purity stolen from them, like what world are we building for them? I think for me personally, trigger warning, like this was something that had happened to me. And I think it made me just very naturally, like much more curious sexually as I grew up. And I was constantly trying to find ways to kind of understand that, but without having language. I wasn't surrounded by people who were willing to talk about it or to be very open with it. And so, when I finally did have my first experience with a boy in high school, my thought was like, okay, now I have to marry this person. And like, I am so glad I did not marry my high school boyfriend. Like, that would have been tragic. But I think we try to find ways to make amends for these parts of us that we feel shame instead of promoting a culture that's going to help them find healing.
Yeah, exactly. Purity culture in no way is a culture of healing. And I think since our specific topic is like, what does it look like moving forward? If I were to speak to someone who, much like us, in many ways have struggled with or encountered or even been inured to purity culture, I would, I think, speak primarily to shame.
Yeah.
Because when shame says that, you are in some way unworthy, I don't think that's a message that is congruent to our soul. Like purity culture, in a way, I think it causes shame to like echo in our souls. Like it's like an echo chamber of shame.
Yeah.
Because there's this check mark, a list, like you are again relegated to something very one-dimensional. And if you make a mistake, then you are forever out of the graces of God, or you are forever unworthy of finding true love. That is such a lie. One of the biggest things I've had to learn, unlearn, construct, deconstruct is that there is nothing I do that stops me from being worthy of love. And I whether it's from my perspective, love from God or love from my community, sex was never great enough from me to define me, so it can't undefine me. I don't know if that's a word, but you get the point. Like it can't be the reason that all of a sudden I'm not good enough. And so I think purity culture highlights this very human tendency to not understand like really meaningful and deep concepts, and in the lack of understanding they try to I guess define it, make a checklist. But humanity, sexuality, my being, I'm 33 and I'm still learning about who I am. I'm still daily falling in love with different parts of me. There's no way some random stranger who decided to write a book can tell me how to navigate such a meaningful part of my life. And for those who are listening, that's not something, you are not defined by other people's perspectives on your sexuality. It's just, you're simply not.
Not to trauma dump really quick, but
no, do it. Go
Let's
for
go.
it.
This is a safe space.
Go for it.
I
Safe
enthusiastically
space.
consent to the trauma dump.
I was raised by abusive parents, and that's why I moved out at 18. That's why I completely separated from that life. But this idea that my worth as a human being is based on what I do and how I act, and especially being a pastor's family and constantly scrutinized by other people, public image is at the forefront of your brain. And so then I shifted from that to well, if my parents can't love me, then maybe my wife in the future can. And so that made me really made me idolize the idea of marriage. And I had to completely deconstruct my idea of marriage. And hearing you and your partner talk about why you're getting married last night was so incredible and special. And I just want you to like repeat what you said last night, because it was so beautiful, that reconstructed idea of marriage.
Yeah, I mean, even the concept of our proposal, like we had to, kind of come out of this kind of patriarchal norm where like the one person, the mask is going to be the one proposing.
The mask effect,
but like literally like what us both saying, we're going to propose to each other, and to kind of create a moment where we're redefining like gender roles and how we're going to show up in this relationship. And marriage for us is not about being sanctioned by the world to be a couple. It's our declaration to the world that we are a couple. And I think we even kind of has postponed some of our marriage because our relationship started at the tail end of seminary, and a lot of my friends were still Adventist. And I was like, who would even come to my wedding? Like, because we were talking about this stuff in our class, and people were saying, I would never go to a gay wedding. People that I love, that I thought were my friends, right? And I was always of the like mindset of like, but why not? Like, these are your friends, these are your people. And I think there's
gay weddings are just so much cooler than straight weddings.
So much better. Mine's gonna have Cirque du Soleil. But like,
Roxanne, how do you feel about
I know
that?
Roxanne's like, you will absolutely not have
That
that.
is the craziest thing I've heard about a wedding ever, actually.
I know,
Like, that was way funnier to me than that.
So we had actually somebody reached out to us because they wanted us to be on their TV show called Dream Weddings Abroad, and they were trying to find out like what is our tension spots, and it turned out to be like what our idea of our ideal wedding was, and hers was like, I want something like simple and white. I was like, I want like drag queens, I want like Cirque du Soleil, like I want like fabulous, and they're like, okay,
I think I saw Cirque and some drag queens on Wish. That might
yes. I'm telling you, if you don't come like wearing your best,
dress up,
yes,
drag
please, and if you don't come with your
Drag
best
at your
makeup, please do. Oh my God, I would love you forever. But I think, us having to redefine what that really looks like. And a part of us has postponed our wedding because we're like, we need to make new friends because I don't know who's going to come to our wedding. Yeah, are all invited.
Flower girl.
Exactly. Because we've had to build a whole new community to say, who are we going to declare that we are a couple and that you can depend on us, and this is a union that like we want to be a part of.
And the accountability aspect that you mentioned of like problems are going to come up. And I think that's, in my mind, when I've reconstructed the idea of marriage, that's the biggest thing that I've come down to, is when you're dating somebody, problems come up, they're unresolvable, you break up.
Yep.
In marriage, yes, it is an option with divorce, but in my mind, that's what separates marriage from dating, is that you're telling yourself it's not an option. Ending it to resolve the conflict is not an option.
Yeah. And I think it's also, to have that support from other people, to normalize that there is going to be conflict, and to be able to talk to other people. Because I think if you, especially me, like being in a queer relationship, if we don't have friends around us who are supportive of that relationship, every bump in the road is going to be like, well, see, this is God cursing you for being gay. Yeah. Instead of being like, there are ways to work through this, just like every other couple has worked through in the past. So
I'm glad that you guys redefined marriage almost. Like you said, you deconstructed your idea of marriage and have kind of come up with like this new definition, because I feel like historically, especially in purity culture, the definition of marriage was like you losing your virginity. Like that's the whole premise of it.
And for us, like I kind of look at marriage as like maybe like a social justice construct at one point, where it's like, here are women who are making themselves vulnerable to be impregnated, to have children, to not be economically viable in a society. Marriage was like a protection. If God was commanding marriage, like it was to protect women or vulnerable members of society from being kind of financially ousted, or like having kids and no way to make an income for themselves. Well, now where we're in like an egalitarian society, or not really, but like we have some apparent rights, where it's like, here are two women coming together. There is no, quote, victim, no person who's more vulnerable than the other. Like, what's the point of this coming together? So it's not so much of a safety net as it is kind of our own infused definition of what we want it to be.
Yeah, even hetero couples where, you pay for childcare and you both have a career. Like, there's so much stability in that that you don't need that safety net anymore.
Yeah, because when I think about marriage as like, I will marry a man someday, maybe, I don't know, who knows. But
are you coming out right now?
But like, I don't think of it in the sense of like, he's superior, I'm inferior. But this goes back to the fact that like, I've spent such a huge amount of time learning myself, loving myself. When I have a partner, my husband, the sole reason, well, for me, I think I, in general, like, want to live a life from my perspective that like glorifies God, but I also want to live a life that honors me.
Yeah.
As in like, again, I'm a singular occurrence, not to be self-centered in any way. I think we all are. And I think that alone is like, as we sit on this couch, I think about things like, what has happened to lead us to this very moment?
Yeah.
Like the fact that there is only one me, and there will only ever be one me throughout all of history. When I think of a partner, I want someone that I can highlight that uniqueness, and they can do the same. Right. So for me, it's not like, oh, I found my provider per se, although he can for sure take care of me. I'm not
I'll be a pretty princess.
Exactly. I'm not above being pampered.
Yeah.
Please and
you don't need to ask
you.
me.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Okay.
And I, again, you mentioned something earlier where it's like, without meaning to, in a lot of ways, I end up being like a paragon for purity culture just because of my personal choices. Even gender norms, I'm not for them, but I also really love cooking and cleaning.
Yeah.
Right?
I told my partner
Yes.
the other day, like, I would love to be a stay-at-home mom.
Yeah.
Like,
I would love to be a housewife. I'm totally okay with
I had
that.
a friend that, and when she was in elementary school, she would feel so ashamed saying that she wanted to be a stay-at-home mom. When she grew up, she was like, I didn't know what else to say, so I just said McDonald's manager.
Oh my God. Stay-at-home mom, way better.
Because it was people had a better reaction to McDonald's manager over stay-at-home
So
mom.
sad.
But I find beauty in it. I find beauty in, and I think, again, knowing my personality, I'm just a caretaker by nature.
Yeah.
Like, and that doesn't diminish the fact that I find myself to be brilliant and capable. That doesn't diminish the fact that I love to pour ideas in the world. I study on my own.
Yeah.
But again, without meaning to, in a lot of ways, I end up being some sort of paragon. But
Poster child.
yeah, I'm a poster child, and I don't even want to be on the poster.
But I feel like
Don't put me on your poster. I don't want to be there.
But she's like a poster child for like post purity culture world,
Yeah.
like being able
Yep.
to consent for yourself and
Yeah.
not listen to other people, like just making decisions for
Yeah.
yourself.
It's
to
like a
not be
purity culture
comfortable,
poster
yeah.
that actually had a good graphic designer.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. Like, as in, like, I was saying this earlier, and it's something I've been thinking about. I really do, like, repudiate the whole concept of purity culture, but there are elements of it that I think, if we're taught in the right way, could be cathartic, could be healing. Again, like, for me, this idea, not of, like, yeah, well, I was gonna say, like, dating, but, like, this whole idea of I am worth being loved and loved well. And I have autonomy over what I give to another person. And I will not give X, Y, and Z, be it my heart, be it my mind, be it my body, to you until I've deemed worthy, until I've decided. That's such a power move.
Yeah, you get to decide
get to
how you want to
decide.
be loved.
Yes.
Not somebody saying this is the only way for you to be loved.
Yeah. And again, like, I think that life is not linear, and all of us sitting here have so many different stories and perspectives, and there's not only one path to, like, living a meaningful and healthy and fulfilling life.
Yeah.
For me, it just so happens that, like, in where I am now, I'm perfectly content waiting until marriage. I'm perfectly content not, like, just dating around. I, like, tried a dating app once for 24 hours. Afterwards, I was like,
That
what
is
a
so
waste
real.
of my existence.
What a
Delete
waste of
this
my data.
immediately. Like, I hate this. But that's just me. I'm perfectly okay with kind of, like, living my life in this way. I find beauty in it. I find a lot of peace in it. I'm not in turmoil internally.
Yeah.
And that's just this is the way that I attained it. And so I can attest to the fact that it is possible from this vantage point, but others can attest to the fact that living a life of meaning is possible from your vantage point as well. And I think that's a beautiful thing.
Yeah,
And a
we
lot of-
all we all get to write our own love story.
We all,
Yeah.
yes. Yeah.
A lot of that concept is really attractive to me because I would consider myself a serial dater. Ever since I got out of the structure where I wasn't allowed to date, I've been in a relationship with someone the entire time since. And you're right, it's highs and lows, it's ups and downs of incredibly good emotions for so long, and then just the worst heartbreak you've ever felt in your life. Especially gay breakups, they suck.
They do.
No one understands
No, I
unless
think
you've
just
lived
breakups.
it.
Nah, listen, y'all. I think it's just breakups. Like,
No,
No.
breakup-
When you
it's
tell
so
someone that
emotional.
you love them a week after you start dating, that breakup is the worst breakup you will ever
Listen.
experience.
the gay post breakup skinny that I get is unmatched. Like, I get so
Okay, but-
snatched.
I'm just telling y'all, it's just breakup. Like, I'm in my room, just like, life is not worth living. Like,
I know, I become like a Victorian orphan, just like rotting away in my bed.
and then I always write like the best poem.
Yes,
Actually,
you're a
I have
writer.
a funny story. So one time I accidentally took shrooms. This is like, whoa! It wasn't.
What do you
intentional.
accidentally?
Someone else had it, and I ate the chocolate. I just thought it was chocolate, and I ate it. And
Like
no.
vitamins.
Girl, that was the best night of your
no,
life.
it wasn't. That wasn't.
She was
I
on a trip.
cried like I'd
Oh.
never cried in my life. I remember looking at my hands like something is off, but I just remember like the person I was interested in at the time, who was totally not interested in me. Like, I like was looking at them on the screen, wrote this whole poem
Oh my
about like,
gosh.
what is love. Anyways, I digress. I think just heartbreak is not really what we're designed for.
Yeah.
We're designed to like love. But like to what you were saying, again, just from my perspective, I've not spent a lot of my life alone, not in a relationship. In fact, the majority, in fact, all of my life, not in a relationship, like a consistent or meaningful relationship. And there are beautiful emotions that you do experience when you find like a partner, someone that is equal, someone that you can do life with. And I'm hopeful for that in the future, but I don't, again, regret spending so much of my life finding who I am. Like being able to identify, like I think of it, I sing, I'm musical, I guess, in that sense. And there's a note, like if I'm singing for church, for example, if I'm off key, it's going to be very discernible. But the only way I can know what the key is I've heard the song enough times. So to spend so much of my life hearing my own song, then it means that when I meet someone who their song is in harmony with mine, I will know.
That's
But
so beautiful.
yeah, like
I'm
I
gonna
like,
cry.
you know, Like, I swear, guys, whenever I find this person, it's on. It's gonna be like so beautiful.
That's gonna be
but
the world's most beautiful romance.
and
better
I
get a
kind of
movie
think
over
so. I
it.
think it's and again, we all navigate relationships so very differently. But for someone out there that maybe has a similar story to me, where like it's just like why have I not found my person yet? And I'm a little bit older than you guys, most like by 10 years or so.
Definitely not me, but that's, thank you.
Okay, you look good. Like, why have
I
I
thought you were
not
19.
found?
I thought you were
I am.
19.
I know.
Yeah, exactly.
That's true. I'm 19. But like, I really I feel as if one of the greatest gifts of my life has come in kind of this season of being intentional in waiting and choosing who I give what to. And I think it will allow me, when I find that person, to create something so profoundly meaningful and so deep, much like many other people have.
And I think what you're getting at, again, is that self-clarity. Like, you've spent time with yourself, to know what you want, to know what kind of relationship you want moving forward. And I think for me, like, when I think about purity culture, I'm thinking of like these ideals, these impossible ideals that usually end up being like white, heterosexual, straight kind of relationships. But all of us here are breaking out of that box one way or another. And so having to tell our own story and not holding ourselves to this ideal, but coming to this deep sense of knowing our own voice and saying what feels right for me on this journey.
Exactly.
Oh.
Sorry. Go for it.
We are running out of time,
Okay.
which is crazy because it feels like it's been 10 minutes.
Yeah, it does.
We'll do
But
10 more.
I do want to touch really quick on the fact that like I'm still friends with a few people from my early days of hyper conservativeness. And I see a lot of confusion and pain in a way, especially in their idea of marriage and just
I know so many gay
relationships and-
seminarians who will not ever pursue a gay relationship because they're still in the church.
So I guess the question, it begs the question, what resources are there? How do we support the people who still subscribe to purity culture, who never had the Josh Harris transformation of dissociating themselves from I Kiss Dating Goodbye? Like, what kind of resources do they get instead of just being made fun of on social media?
I guess it's just like meeting people where they're at, right? Like you can't fix something that doesn't want to be fixed almost. So just like being supportive. I feel like that's such a cheesy cop-out answer, but I feel like nothing really beats it, right? Like you just have to be there for them, meet them where they're at, kind of talk, navigate those conversations like in the middle almost.
I think what's so interesting, I think of like the Scarlet Letter, where this woman who was accused of being an adulteress, like she eventually becomes somebody that other people go to and feel safe with. And I think for me, what I have tried to be is just a safe person, because a lot of my friends, whether or not they subscribe to purity culture, will find themselves not meeting that standard because the standard is impossible. And so when they come and they talk to me and say, I did this, like to open up a new and more self-compassionate view for them, to say like, okay, like let's not beat yourself up. Like let's look at this from
Because there is a lot of shame in that conversation.
Yeah, exactly. Let's look at this from a much more compassionate point of view, and to try and be a soft landing spot, so that they can come to their own kind of awakening of like, maybe this is not an ideal I need to continue to keep up.
Exactly. I think purity culture, much like faith, is a conversation of like profound interiority. It's so much about what's going on within. And resource wise, I say go to therapy, find like a good therapist that can understand like how the tendrils of your faith and sexuality have been like just in your heart, and how to remove those like safely and healthily. But I also just think for those who are still kind of struggling with purity culture, and in many ways I still bear the scars. Like I think many people bear the scars. I think the greatest thing I would say is like shame cannot be the way you define yourself. It should not. The fact that you are worth so much, like there's no cap on how much you're worth, and certainly a sexual act does not diminish that. I think for those who are still in it, just honoring the fact that all of us sitting here, we carry a deep and profound pain. It's just a part of our humanity, but while we carry pain, there's also beauty within us, and the thing that defines us shouldn't be like our negative experiences, and certainly not the opinions of strangers. I think this idea of supporting people as they navigate that journey is so meaningful. But if I were to like sit face to face with someone right now who still feels and who's still limited by this shameful idea that my sexuality is where my worth is found, I would just say that that's a lie. It's a lie. It's a lie. It's a lie. And there's so much more to you than a sexual act. You are worth infinitely more than really even our relationship status.
Yeah, it's
Like
such a reductionist view.
Yeah, like we're worth it. We're worthy simply because we're alive and breathing. So I think grace to those who are still in it, grace to ourselves.
Yeah.
And therapy.
And therapy. And therapy.
And therapy, yes.
Well, I'm impressed. You guys have solved the world's problems.
Yeah.
In an hour.
Yeah.
I mean, wow.
Oh, we're so good.
But the politics.
Definitely should be paid more for solving world issues. But
Well, this has been really fun.
yeah, this has been great.
You guys.
Thanks for having me.
Thanks for having me.
Yay.